Africa. Africa is the second largest and second most populous continent in the world, both rankings going to Asia. It occupies 20% of the planet's land area and around 30.3 million square kilometers, or 6% of its total surface area. As of 2021, it has 1.4 billion inhabitants, or nearly 18% of all people on Earth. Africa has the youngest population of all the continents, with a median age of 19.7 in 2012, compared to a global average of 30.4. Despite having a variety of natural resources, Africa is the second least rich continent overall, behind Oceania, and the least wealthy per person. Numerous variables, such as geography, climate, tribalism, colonialism, the Cold War, 17, neocolonialism, a lack of democracy, and corruption have been suggested as causes by academics. Africa is a significant economic market in the larger global context despite the low wealth concentration, recent economic growth, and the huge and youthful population. The Mediterranean Sea to the north, the Suez Canal and the Red Sea to the northeast, the Indian Ocean to the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean to the west encircle the continent. Several archipelagos and Madagascar are part of the continent. 8 territories, 2 de facto independent nations with little or no recognition, and 54 fully recognized sovereign states make up the region. Africa's largest nation by land is Algeria, while its biggest by population is Nigeria. African countries work together through the African Union, which was founded and has its headquarters in Addis Ababa. Africa lies on both sides of the prime meridian and the equator. The only continent that stretches from the northern to southern temperate zones is this one. With the exception of a sizable section and a significant number of countries, the continent and its countries are located primarily in the northern hemisphere. Except for a significant portion of Western Sahara, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, the northern tip of Mauritania, the entirety of Morocco, Ceuta, Melilla, and Tunisia, which are all located above the Tropic of Cancer in the northern temperate zone, the majority of the continent is tropical. On the other end of the continent, in the southern temperate zone, are southern Namibia, southern Botswana, large portions of South Africa, the entirety of Lesotho and Eswatini, as well as the southernmost points of Mozambique and Madagascar. Because it was least damaged by the demise of the Pleistocene megafauna, Africa has the greatest diversity of species of megafauna of any continent. But a host of environmental problems, including as pollution, water scarcity, desertification, and deforestation, also have a significant impact on Africa. As climate change affects Africa, it is anticipated that these long-standing environmental challenges will get worse. Africa is the continent most susceptible to climate change, according to the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Africa's history is lengthy, intricate, and frequently overlooked by the world's historians. The hominidae group, which includes humans, are largely believed to have its origins in Africa, especially Eastern Africa. The earliest Homo sapiens, modern human, remains, discovered in Ethiopia, South Africa, and Morocco, date to approximately 233,000, 259,000, and 300,000 years ago, respectively. Homo sapiens is thought to have originated in Africa around 350,000 to 260,000 years ago. The earliest hominids and their ancestors have been dated to around 7 million years ago, including Sahelanthropus cadensis, Australopithecus africanus. Afar anthropologists believe that Africa has the most genetic diversity of any continent on the Earth since it has been inhabited for the longest periods of time. North Africa was the birthplace of early human civilizations including ancient Egypt and Carthage. Africa now has a wide variety of races, cultures, and languages thanks to a long and complicated history of civilizations, migration, and trade. Over the past 400 years, Europe's impact on the continent has grown. Trade, notably the transatlantic slave trade, which resulted in sizable African diaspora communities in the Americas, drove this starting in the 16th century. Except for Liberia and Ethiopia, which Italy later attacked and controlled from 1936 to 1941, practically all of Africa was colonized by European countries between the late 19th and the early 20th centuries. After World War II, Africa underwent a process of decolonization that produced the majority of its current states. Early African civilizations. The beginning of recorded history in northern Africa occurs around 3300 BC, when the pharaonic culture of ancient Egypt experiences a growth in literacy. The Egyptian state lasted until 343 BC and was one of the first and longest-lasting civilizations in the world. It had varied degrees of influence on neighboring regions. According to Martin Bernal, Egypt had a significant impact on modern-day Libya, Nubia, and Crete. Phoenicians from Tyre built Carthage, an independent center of civilization with connections to Phoenicia through trade. Ancient Greeks and Romans were the first Europeans to explore Africa. Alexander the Great was welcomed as a liberator in a Persian-controlled Egypt in the year 332 BC. Alexandria, which he established in Egypt, went on to become the thriving capital of the Ptolemaic dynasty following his passing. The region was included into the Roman system economically and culturally after the Roman Empire conquered the Mediterranean coast of North Africa. Along the shore, including in modern-day Tunisia, the Romans established settlements. Septimius Severus, the first Roman emperor of North Africa, was born at Leptis Magna, modern-day Libya. His mother was an Italian Roman, while his father was Punic. Early on, Christianity began to spread throughout these regions, from Judea through Egypt and beyond the Roman Empire's borders into Nubia. At the latest by the year 340 AD, it had established itself as the official religion of the Aksumite Empire. It was Syro-Greek missionaries that crossed the Red Sea and brought this theological advancement. The newly established Arabian Islamic Caliphate grew into Egypt and later North Africa in the early 7th century. The indigenous Berber elite quickly became a part of the Muslim Arab clans. When the Umayyad capital Damascus was destroyed in the 8th century, Kairouan in North Africa became the new location of the Islamic Mediterranean. Islamic North Africa had expanded culturally and had become a center for mystics, scholars, legal experts, and philosophers. Islam mostly extended to sub-Saharan Africa throughout the time period described above through trade routes and migration. Dartikhit and Walata in modern-day Mauritania stand out among the early urban settlements in West Africa that date to 2000 BC. In the formerly Saharan savanna, there are about 500 stone dwellings spread throughout the area. The locals raised millet and engaged in fishing. Augustine Hull has discovered that these towns were probably built by the Soninke of the Mande peoples. The settlements most likely relocated to Kumbi Sala when the area grew increasingly arid around 300 BC. The examination of ceramic types and architectural evidence suggests that Dartikhit was related to the succeeding Ghana Empire. Around 300 BC saw the settlement of Djendjeno, in modern-day Mali, which developed to house a substantial Iron Age population as shown by the town's numerous graves. Sun-dried mud was used to create living constructions. Djendjeno had grown into a sizable, prosperous market town by 250 BC. Mineral industry of Africa. The second largest mineral industry in the world is found in Africa. With a land area of 30.37 million square kilometers, Africa is the second largest continent, which suggests that there are abundant resources there. With 1.216 billion people residing there. Mineral exploration and production are important drivers of economic growth for many African nations. They also represent large portions of their economies. The world's largest reserves of bauxite, cobalt, industrial diamonds, phosphate rock, platinum group metals, vermiculite, and zirconium are found in Africa, which is also rich in other mineral resources. Without a question, the continent of Africa has the greatest abundance of resources. In various regions of the continent, resources like gold, diamonds, oil, natural gas, copper, and uranium are mined. Natural resources are present in almost all of Africa. About 97% of the world's chromium, 90% of its cobalt, 85% of its platinum, 70% of its cocoa, and 60% of its coffee are found on this continent. Despite its wealth in resources, Africa is the world's poorest continent. Africa has some of the lowest per capita incomes in the world. The World Bank claims that Africa has the lowest GDP per capita, with its per capita income accounting for just 3% of global revenue. Significant numbers of people still live in extreme poverty throughout Africa. In comparison to other continents, Africa has the lowest life expectancy. Other measures of economic development and growth are likewise below average for the continent. The continent hasn't had much progress in the fight against poverty. The failure to achieve the Millennium Development Goals serves as evidence of this. Africa struggles in international trade despite having a wealth of natural resources. The percentage of global trade under its control is only around 3%. This is true notwithstanding the substantial exports of natural resources from Africa. The world's most unstable democracies have also been found on the continent. Some African nations frequently experience political unrest. A few African nations, like Somalia, have even been referred to as failed states due to the collapse of their political structures. These and numerous more elements push African nations even further into poverty. The biggest contradiction of them all is that the continent with the most natural resources also has the poorest nations on the planet.